Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we are starting a new chapter today, Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter number 10, text number 1. Shri Bhagavana Vacha Bhuya Eva Mahavaho Shrinu Me Paramam Vachaha Yate Aham Priyamanaya Vakshami Hitakamyaya. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "Listen again, O mighty armed Arjuna, because you are my dear friend. For your benefit, I shall speak to you further, giving knowledge that is better than what I have already explained." Om Agyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmitamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. What a beautiful verse. This chapter 10 actually has 4 verses which kind of summarizes the whole Bhagavad Gita, and it is called Chatur Shloki. Chatur means 4, Shloka means verses. So there's 4 verses we will cover during the next few weeks. But today we can see the very first thing that we notice is Bhagavan Shri Bhagavan Vacha. Bhaga, opulences, Van means possessor of opulences. So here it is very clearly mentioned that the speaker of the Bhagavad Gita is Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the scriptures, there are qualifications given for even the Supreme Lord. Just like a doctor has qualifications, you see the certification on in the room on the wall. Any um, talent or any qualifications that we have is certified. So here we get a certification who can be considered God, not anyone and everyone. God is singular, which means he has no one who is equal to him or above him. So Parashur Muni, who is the father of Vyasadeva, Vyasadeva is an incarnation of Krishna. He tells us, Eshwarasya Samagrasya Virasya Yashashriya. He gives 6 qualifications of Supreme Lord. He says, any personality that has these 6 opulences in full, full means absolutely full, there should be no shortage at all, like 100%. And what are those 6 qualities that the Lord should have? All wealth, strength, fame, beauty, knowledge, and renunciation. These are the 6 qualifications. And when we see, who has these, it is Krishna who has all these qualities in full. And that is why he is called Bhagavan, the Supreme Lord. So here Krishna is telling Arjuna, listen again. Now one may say, why is he repeating? I mean, Arjuna should have understood in first shot, but no. We also notice, in our day-to-day life when we are trying to learn something, or so there is repetition on it, that's when we can memorize it. Even the children in school, they are taught, 1 plus 1 equals 2, 1 plus 1 equals 2, 1 plus 1 equals 2, continue for a couple of times, because memory is so poor. But here Arjuna's memory was not poor, but still Krishna is telling him, listen again. Because it is very important, this knowledge is so important that Krishna is repeating it. And he also says that not only just listen again, he's telling him that because you're my very dear friend, for your benefit, I shall speak to you further. So these are the qualifications of the listener. The one who is hearing Bhagavad Gita also has to be qualified. That person has to at least have basic faith in Krishna. Otherwise, how will one understand the Bhagavad Gita, the basic faith? Scriptures tell us he is God, so we believe it. And then we build up on that faith by hearing more and more. So, because Arjuna is Krishna's dear friend, and for benefit of Arjuna, he is speaking further. Now, Arjuna was a pure devotee. He didn't need to hear all this, but he heard this all for us so that we could understand, we could benefit from this. So it's for our benefit that Krishna is giving further knowledge. And he's saying, I'm going to give you knowledge which is better than what I've already explained to you. So whatever we've learned from chapter 2, that's when Krishna starts speaking, chapter 3 to chapter 9. Krishna is saying, I'm going to give you something better. In fact, it is said that, so Bhagavad Gita has 18 chapters. So chapter 1 through 6, 1 through 6, it is about Karma Yoga. But chapter 7 through 12 is Bhakti Yoga, which is the essence of Bhagavad Gita. Bhakti means devotion. It is about devotional service to Krishna. And the remaining 6 chapters, 13 through 18, is Jnana Yoga. So Krishna has, just like you have a sandwich, you have bread, and in between you have butter, jam, cheese, whatever. So bread, both sides, and in between is the main stuff. So the main stuff is Bhakti Yoga, which is between these 6 chapters on top and 6 chapters at the bottom. So we can see that Krishna, for our benefit, is repeating, not only repeating, but also giving knowledge which is better than what he has given so far. So this knowledge about Bhakti Yoga, the more we will hear, the more we will benefit. See, now, when in this verse, Krishna says, because you're my very dear friend, a thought occurred to me, how is he, how is he our friend? Very simple, because he's traveling with us in each body. See, so we have this gross body, which we can see, and then there's a subtle body inside the heart, which comprises of mind, intelligence, and false ego. So the subtle body is in the heart. The soul, that who we really are, the spirit soul, is also in the heart. And Krishna, as the super soul of Paramatma, is also within the heart. So all these together, they travel from one body to another until and unless we break the cycle of birth and death and go back to the spiritual world. So because he's traveling with us in all these different bodies, obviously he is our very dear friend. Otherwise, why would he take that trouble? So for our benefit, he's giving us better knowledge. Now, what is that better knowledge? Better knowledge about himself, more knowledge about himself, and not only that, more knowledge about his opulences. See, um, to be able to understand, Krishna and his opulences, we definitely need faith, basic faith. And not only that, we also need to be inquisitive, should want to know, not of course in a challenging attitude, but in a humble attitude, want to know more, want to have answers to, our questions. And Bhagavad Gita answers all the questions we may have in our lives. So of course, the knowledge is given according to time, place, and circumstance. Just like when I am also teaching Bhagavad Gita, say if there in the class there are people who have just started learning Bhagavad Gita, so I'm going to talk in a very basic way, but someone who's been hearing for a long time, has quite a bit of knowledge, then the level of knowledge is going to be a little different. Let me give you an example. Just like in the first grade, the teacher is just going to, teach 1 plus 1 equals 2. But when that same child goes to high school, is not going to learn 1 plus 1, 2, but is going to learn calculus because it's advanced knowledge. But a first grader will not understand calculus because that child is at a different level of understanding. So it's important to understand Bhagavad Gita with at least basic faith, because Krishna, we've already learned in the previous chapters, where Krishna says, for the doubting soul, there is no peace in this world. Now, let me give you an example. Supposing I have never met my father, I don't know who my father is, and the best source of that knowledge is my mother. My mother is the only one who knows who my real father is. So if I'm going to doubt my mother's words, then who's going to be the loser? I'm going to be the loser, because then I will have to do my own research, which may or may not give me the right answer. So similarly, Krishna is the father, and the Bhagavad Gita is like the mother who's giving us knowledge about the Father, our Supreme Father. In fact, if I don't know how many of you have read the Bhagavad Gita as it is, but if you, see it at least online, if you read in the introduction, page 3, Srila Prabhupada says that unless we accept Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we won't be able to understand the Bhagavad Gita. We need to understand Bhagavad Gita like Arjuna understood, like Arjuna's attitude, the way in which he understood. In fact, in chapter 7 of the Bhagavad Gita, we learned about the different energies of Krishna, right? And in this chapter number 10, Krishna is going to talk about his specific opulences and manifestations, very specific. So that, one may question, why should we hear about the opulences of the Supreme Lord? So that we can appreciate his position as the Supreme Lord, to understand how great he is. So, of course, we need to understand that there is a difference between opulences and devotion. We hear about Krishna's opulences so that our devotion and faith can increase towards him. That is the whole purpose. The more we will hear, the more we will hear, the more we will be fixed up in devotional service. So if we are, anxious to hear about Krishna, then our progress will be faster spiritually. The more we hear, the more we will progress and the more we will benefit. That is the whole point. In this material world, for everything, we want to know what's in it for me. What benefit am I going to get? How am I going to, what are the advantages of whatever I am doing? So here we can see that the more we will hear, the more, not only just here, but here in association of devotees, here in association of spiritually minded people, then the more the devotion is going to increase. But of course, to hear, that desire must be there. Otherwise, there will be no self-realization. You see, with the oral reception, like, the sound vibrations, the ear receives them, but one has to be receptive. Otherwise, it will just stay like words, like Bhagavad Gita, Supreme Lord, Krishna, all these will just be the words. You see, the person has to be receptive. The ears, they receive the knowledge, but then we have to be receptive to hear. So that means there has to be an eagerness to hear. See, the fact that all of you are here present on Zoom today is because you're eager to hear about the Bhagavad Gita. Even though some of you have been hearing for a couple of months now, maybe a couple of years, but you still want to hear because that eagerness is there. In this world, excuse me, people generally like to hear what they like to hear, not what they need to hear. There's a big difference, right? They want to hear what they like. They don't want to hear anything that they don't like. I was listening to one of the stories, and it was a lady. She went on a world tour. So she told her husband that, I'm leaving behind my mother and my dogs, so please take care of them. And he said, sure, I will. Of course, he didn't have a choice, but he was okay. He said, okay, I'll take care. So what she would do when she would go from one city to another, then she would call her husband and ask, how's my mother? How's my dog? And he would say, yeah, they're fine. So one day she was in a different city and she asked her husband, how's my dog? He said, oh, I'm sorry, your dog died. She yelled at him. She said, what's wrong with you? You don't give such knowledge all of a sudden, you have to break it down gently. You can't just, say your dog is dead kind of thing. So he said, then what do you want me to say? She said, well, you should first, when I call you, you should say, well, the dog went on the roof. Then next time when I called you, you should have said, the dog, I'm saying God, sorry, the dog slipped from the roof and fell down. And then when I called you again, then you would have said, oh, I'm sorry your dog died. He said, oh, okay. So then, of course, she was very sad that her dog had died. But then, the next city when she went, she called up her husband and said, "How's my mother?" And he said, "Well, your mother went on the roof." And it didn't strike her, but you see, this is what she liked to hear. Of course, her mother had died, but he said it the way she wanted. Like she went onto the roof. The next time when she called, he would say, oh, she fell down from the roof. And then the next call, he would say, oh, she died. But you see, this is crazy. We like to hear what we like to hear, not what we need to hear. So Bhagavad Gita is giving us knowledge which we need to hear. We may like it, we may not like it, but it is something that we need to hear. So Krishna is saying that those who are not yet my friend, but once they start hearing about my opulences, will start considering me as their friend. So this is what we learn from this verse. Let's see what Krishna says in verse number 2. He says, neither the hosts of demigods nor the great sages know my origin or opulences. For in every respect, I am the source of the demigods and sages. So here is very, very, very clear that there is a difference between God, Krishna, and the demigods like Brahma, Shiva, Ganesh, all these different demigods. So here, Krishna is making it very clear, no doubt at all, that the demigods and the sages, he says, I am the origin, everyone comes from me, and even they do not know all my opulences. When we go to chapter number 11 now, so till from chapter 2 through 10, it's all theory part, theoretically we are understanding Krishna, but in chapter number 11, we will Krishna will show us practically how he is the Supreme Lord, which means he will show his universal form in which Arjuna will see everyone coming from Krishna, whether it is Brahma, Shiva, Ganesh, sun, moon, all of us, all living entities, aquatics, birds, insects, everyone coming from Krishna. That we will see that. That is what he's saying now. I am the origin. So even the demigods, they don't know Krishna completely because they are administrators. Just like I had explained earlier, that Goddess Lakshmi is the one who gives wealth. Uh, you know, um, Goddess Saraswati gives education. Lord Ganesha, auspiciousness, Lord Shiva and Parvati, if we worship, they give you a good husband or wife. So each one, like Lord Indra, is in charge of rainfall. So each demigod is like an administrator. And Krishna says, I am the source. Now, when we go further down in this chapter, Krishna will explain to Arjuna, Aham sarvasya prabho mataha sarvam pravartate iti matva bhajante. Krishna says, everything emanates from me, whether it is material planets, spiritual planets, demigods, living entities, everyone emanates from me, comes from me. He's the supreme, and no one is greater. In fact, the first created being Lord Brahma, in his prayers to Krishna, he says, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karana Karana. He says, Krishna, you are the Supreme Lord and you are the cause of all causes. So, even demigods, it says here, cannot understand Krishna. So, how do we understand Krishna? By hearing. When we hear from a bona fide source, we hear again and again and again. That is how, when Krishna sees our sincerity to understand Bhagavad Gita, he helps us by his mercy, then we are able to understand Krishna. And how? We need to surrender. Surrender is a very what you call a very strong word, because no one likes to surrender to anybody. We want to be the controllers, we want to be the enjoyers, we want to be the masters. We don't want to surrender unto anyone. But here the talk is about surrendering to the Supreme Lord. When we do that, what does it mean, surrender? It means we follow the instructions given to us by Him in the Bhagavad Gita. And then His mercy comes to us because of our sincerity. So, two things are required, faith and devotion. These two are required to receive the mercy of the Supreme Lord. Let's see what is verse number 3. Krishna says, He who knows me as the unborn, as the beginningless, as the supreme Lord of all the worlds, he only, undeluded among men, is freed from all sins. So, very simple. It's actually a formula for us to become free of sins. Now, I don't think any of us can, say that I have never committed any sin. We have committed sins over the past, during this lifetime or even in the previous lifetimes. So here's a formula by which we become free from the sinful reactions, which means our karma becomes zero. Like, that there'll be no more sinful reactions. How? If we know that Krishna is unborn, that means he's always there. It's not that he took birth and he dies. God never dies. God doesn't take birth. So Krishna, the Supreme Lord, he is unborn. He's beginningless. And he's the Supreme Lord of all the worlds. Then one will become freed from all sins, and not only that, become free from delusion also. You see, in the Bhagavad Gita, there is a very nice verse which says, Manushyanam sahasreshu kaschid yatati siddhe yatatam ati siddhanam kaschid mam veti tattvataha. So Krishna says, out of thousands of men or people, hardly one will try for perfection. And out of thousands who have attained perfection, Krishna says, hardly one knows me in truth. Tattvataha means in truth. So it is not very common or very easy to understand Krishna. In fact, in this verse, Krishna says, Veti Loka Maheshwaram, right? Veti Loka Maheshwaram. What does that actually mean? It means that he is the supreme proprietor and he is unborn. Even Brahma is born. Lord Shiva also is born. Lord Shiva is born from Brahma. He's the son of Brahma. So you see, it's not easy to understand, but it becomes easy when we have mercy of the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, because he sees we have a sincere desire to understand, and then he helps. So of course someone may say 5,000 years ago Krishna came, to this earthly planet. He was not born. He appeared. He first appeared as in the form of Vishnu to show his parents that I am the Supreme Lord. Then his parents, told him, okay, please don't be in this form because your uncle Kamsa is going to try to kill you. You please become like an ordinary small baby, so that's what he did. So from that, we can understand he is not ordinary. He is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, it becomes easier to understand Bhagavad Gita when we learn it through a bona fide spiritual teacher, because the bona fide teacher will give knowledge as it is without any change, right? Just like when I am explaining the Bhagavad Gita, I'm not telling you what I think, what my opinion is, what are my, ideas. No, because I am a person with defects. We all human beings, we have four defects. So we cannot give perfect knowledge because we are imperfect people. But here we see that if we really want to hear Bhagavad Gita as it is without any interpretation, then we need to learn it from a bona fide teacher who has learned from his teacher, from his teacher, from his teacher, and the whole line of disciplic succession goes all the way to Krishna. In introduction of the Bhagavad Gita, the very last uh, page of the introduction, you can see there is a disciplic succession of this Bhagavad Gita as it is. So it is, there is, you can call a trinity if we really want to verify. Guru, Sadhu, Shastra. Guru is bona fide teacher. Shastra, we know, are the scriptures, and Sadhu are the teachers who are coming down in that disciplic succession. That is how we can understand the Bhagavad Gita very nicely. Just like I have learned it from my spiritual teacher, who learned it from his spiritual teacher, who is Srila Prabhupada, and his teacher, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and it goes all the way up to Krishna. Let's do the last two verses for today, 4 and 5. This is what Krishna says. Intelligence, knowledge, freedom from doubt and delusion, forgiveness, truthfulness, control of the senses, control of the mind, happiness and distress, birth, death, fear, fearlessness, non-violence, equanimity, satisfaction, austerity, charity, fame, and infamy. All these various qualities of living beings are created by me alone. Very simple. Krishna says, all this is created by me. Now, these are a lot of things we learned in just these two. First of all, Krishna talks about intelligence. Now, intelligence that he's talking about, I'm going to give you a summary of what Srila Prabhupada says in his purport. He says intelligence, it is referring to the power to analyze in proper perspective. That is intelligence. What is knowledge? Knowledge is that which helps us to understand difference between matter and spirit. It's not talking about material knowledge that we get in the universities. No, it's talking about spiritual knowledge which helps us to understand the difference between matter and spirit. That is knowledge. In schools and colleges, they do not teach us about spirit soul. They will teach us about science, arts, commerce, all different subjects, but we will never come across a class where they are teaching us about spirit soul. So that is the knowledge Krishna is talking about here. Material education, will only teach us about matter, not about spirit at all. But knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita, it helps us to free ourselves from all the doubts and all the delusions, and then there is no more bewilderment at all. Now, the non-violence that Krishna is talking about in this verse, it means not to put anyone else in misery or confusion. Sometimes the way we talk, the tone in which we talk causes misery to others, because just like we don't like anyone yelling at us, we don't like anyone being mean to us or rude to us. Similarly, others don't like to be treated that way. So, non-violence here in this verse means not to put others in misery or confusion. Now, Krishna talks about tolerance and forgiveness. Oh, it's so difficult. It's so difficult to forgive. And not only that, forgive and forget is more difficult. Oh, this one did this to me, and I am so mad about it. And, whatever. We just go on and on and on. And, we may say, okay, I forgive you, but forgetting it becomes very difficult. But here, Krishna is saying we need to practice it. You see, we should learn the art of tolerance and excuse minor offenses. Okay, so what? When a person is angry, they say things they don't mean, they do things that they don't mean, etc., etc. But if we practice tolerance and if we practice forgiveness, of course, there can be a 7-day seminar or a 1-month seminar on forgiveness and forgive and forget, but we don't have much time here. So just the idea, that these are the qualities that are needed. Only when we have these qualities that we can become sin free. That means no more sinful reactions. And the other quality that Krishna talked about was truthfulness, which means we should state the facts as they are. There should be no duplicity. See, there has to be truthfulness is actually one of the spiritual pillars that are required in our spiritual life. There are 4 pillars required, just like the house is standing on pillars, because if there are no strong pillars, the house is going to collapse. Similarly, our spiritual lives also is held on 4 pillars: mercy, truthfulness, austerity, and cleanliness. These are the 4 pillars, spiritual pillars required. Mercy, if one is eating meat, non-vegetarian food, then that person cannot be merciful, because we have to be merciful even towards the animals. They also have a spirit soul and they also like to live. They don't like to die. So if we are vegetarians, then we have that strong pillar of mercy. Cleanliness, if we follow the rule of no illicit sex, then that means we are clean. That is cleanliness. Then there's austerity. If we do not take any intoxication, then our pillar of austerity is there, because if we do not um, if we take intoxication, we cannot perform austerity. So that's the 3rd pillar. And the 4th pillar is truthfulness or honesty. So if a person does not gamble, then that person is considered to be truthful, because in gambling, of course, a person has to be dishonest to be able to, be the winner. So these are the 4 pillars. You can call them 4 spiritual pillars. So here Krishna is talking about truthfulness, which means we must state the facts as they are. No duplicity, but we have to put it in um, a very pleasing way. In fact, when we go to the later chapters of Bhagavad Gita, chapter 17 and 18, we will learn the austerity of speech. The austerity of speech is we have to be honest, but we have to be very sweet. We have to be, the words that come out from our mouth have to be pleasing and palatable. That is an austerity of speech that we will learn more in the other chapters. Now, it's important to train, you know, not only ourselves, even to others, how to use this mind and body and not misuse it. Because this human form of life comes with philosophical intelligence, which means the intelligence that can help us to understand I am not this body, I am the spirit soul, and to understand the goal of human life. We cannot live like cats and dogs. We are not animals, we are human beings. What do the animals do? Eat, sleep, mate, and defend. These are the four things they do. Now we need to do something beyond that. We need to inquire. We need to become spiritually realized, and not use our senses unnecessarily, controlling the mind, like in this verse that we read. Krishna talks about controlling, also controlling the senses, controlling the mind, controlling the body. Imagine that there is a chariot and there are five horses, and the horses are wild, and each horse is trying to go in different direction. Then what is going to happen? There's going to be chaos. So let's imagine that our senses are like those wild horses and they are going in all different directions. Then we sitting in that chariot, we will be bewildered and it will be confusing. We may even fall off the chariot because these wild horses are going in different directions. So our senses are like that. So we need to control the senses. And of course, Krishna talks about austerity, austerity of the body, austerity of the mind, austerity of the senses. When we follow these rules and regulations that are given to us in the Bhagavad Gita, it helps us to control our mind and our senses also. Let me give you an example. Um, One of the rules that we could follow, which actually we should follow, is fasting. Fasting on, like I was talking in the previous class, fasting on Ekadashi. Like I'm in India right now, and yesterday was Ekadashi for us here in India. So we fasted. We fasted from grains and beans. We did not eat grains and beans. All we ate was just fruits and vegetables. Of course, this way the digestive system also gets a break, to kind of get re-energized, to work better. So this rule is there to fast on these days. That is an austerity. It's not very easy because, the senses are so used to eating everything and anything and everything. So, but here we get an opportunity to perform some austerity. And another austerity could be that we be satisfied with whatever we have obtained from the Lord, not try to struggle hard to do two jobs and three jobs to get more and more and more material possessions. In chapter 3 and 5 of Bhagavad Gita, we learned how does karma work. Based on our past karma, we get X amount of happiness and X amount of distress. That we cannot change because it's past, our past activities. So what we are experiencing at present cannot be changed because those are the seeds we have sowed, whether it is of good activities or bad activities. We are just now reaping the fruit of our actions. So, which means we cannot change the present, but definitely we can change the future by what we do now at present. So, one must not, struggle hard to get more and more material possessions because we will only get what we deserve based on our past karma. And so we need to be satisfied with whatever is provided to us. Then there is talk about charity in these two verses we read. Now, charity should be given to the right person at the right time, at the right place. In chapter 17 and 18, we learn more about how charity also falls in different modes of material nature: goodness, passion, ignorance. And accordingly, we get the reactions of that. So it's, important to learn that too. Krishna says equanimity, which refers to freedom from, attachment, aversion, which means, not get disturbed by happiness, distress, heat, cold, success, failure, not be disturbed, but just be equipoised. So understanding Bhagavad Gita, what are the benefits? It helps us to get rid of all anxiety, all kinds of anxiety. So when we start performing devotional service to Krishna, then all these qualities that we learned just now in verse 4 and 5, they will automatically develop within us. See, automatically they will develop within us. We don't have to struggle hard. And then, of course, we will also understand that human life is meant for self-realization. So we see that chapter 1 through 6 talks about karma yoga, how we can, connect based on our actions. Then chapter 7 through 12 is about bhakti yoga, devotional service. And chapter 13 to 18 is jnana yoga, which is giving us more and more knowledge. So question is, why should we hear Bhagavad Gita, or why should we understand and follow Bhagavad Gita? Very simple. Srila Prabhupada explains that when we try to learn Bhagavad Gita, the result is healthy body, stress-free mind, sharp intelligence to make the right choices, and happy souls. These are the four benefits of learning Bhagavad Gita. So it is not a religious book. It is not any form of religion. It is just a science of self-realization. In fact, in chapter 4 of the Bhagavad Gita, we learned Krishna says, this spiritual science, imam vivasvate yogam proktavan aham avyayam. He says, this spiritual science was given by me to the sun god Vivaswan first. You see, he calls it a spiritual science, not a religious book or some form of religion. No, just a science of self-realization. That is what he is talking about. So we have learned quite a bit today in this beginning few verses of chapter 10. But of course, we learn more and more. And in chapter 11, we will see the practical demonstration of what we've learned from chapter 2 through chapter 10. So I'm going to end here now. If